And finally, the Giants. They beat the Reds 6-4. CES, Friedel, Candelario all have 3 hits. Candy has 3 RBIs. Hunter Greene tossed 5 innings, 3-hit, 2-run baseball, struck out 8. Scott Barlow came in, pitched well, struck out 2, didn't allow a base runner. Emilio Pagan struck out 2, didn't allow a base runner. Tony Santillan struck out 2, didn't allow a base runner.
Wow, this game's awesome.
And then, in the 9th inning, we were live streaming the game, and we all collectively gasped in the studio.
Yeah.
Because in the top of the 9th inning, Ian Gibaut walks in. 3 hits, 4 earned runs, a walk, and a blown save. Absolutely ridiculous. Here's what I'll say. It's game 1. It's a 162-game season. We very may well not look at this game in the large scheme of things down the stretch. We might not. The biggest game of the year every year until the clinching game of the playoffs or the division is opening day. How is it in this situation did our manager, Terry Francona, roll with Ian Gibaut? I know the bit. I do the bit. I love the bit. I think the bit's funny.
Bit's a lot less funny when he's a terrible closer.
The bit is not funny when he's the closer of the team. The bit works when he's throwing 3 innings in a blowout in like the 5th inning. Like that's like 5th, 6th, 7th. Like that's all fine. The decision to put Ian Gibaut in, and this is, I know it's going to come off as, I know I'm an exaggerative person. I exaggerate a lot. I go into dramatics a lot. It was one of the worst managerial decisions I've seen by a Cincinnati Reds manager ever. Everybody in the ballpark, everybody here in the studio, everybody in the outskirts of Cincinnati, everybody listening to 700 WLW, everybody knew that Ian Gibaut is not a closer. How is that message not communicated to the manager of the team? I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know more than Terry Francona. I don't. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know more than anybody. I'm a stupid person. But that decision yesterday, was one of the most baffling decisions ever. There are so many better options. He was a non-roster invitee. This isn't like some guy who's had a long history of success in Major League Baseball. This is Ian Gibaut. We're talking about Ian Gibaut. And that's the decision. That's the call. I just listed those 3 relievers. 2 strikeouts for each of them, not a base runner in those 3 innings with those 3 pitchers. There was no thought of maybe carrying it over.
Ashcraft's just keeping the bench warm.
We have Graham Ashcraft, a guy who's started a lot of games for this team, who has a lot of dirty stuff, I would say. If you had to go like stuff meter, he's got some good stuff.
Bulldog.
And we're going to go with Ian Gibaut?
Well, also, too, I mean, Kirby was flabbergasted because it was a left-right left or a right-left, you know.
Left-right left.
Yeah, it was. And we're throwing out Gibaut instead of someone else. Like, it just didn't make any sense from a logical perspective and what works with his strengths. I mean, it just didn't make sense at all. Top to bottom.
It's baffling. You know, and I understand we had the show on yesterday, or excuse me, we had the show yesterday. And Craig and Nick, they were kind of hesitant about throwing Taylor Rogers out there. Yeah. Taylor Rogers has a history of saving games.
I think the issue with that is what Casey was bringing up there with the left, right, left. And if you are hunting splits, then he's not necessarily an option there.
And that's fine. If you're going to do the split thing, that's fine.
But then why would Tony can't be your option?
Then why would Tony Santillan face 2 lefties the inning prior?
Correct. I agree.
You know what I mean? Like if that's the reasoning, why be so inconsistent with it? It doesn't make any sense. There are better options in our bullpen. I don't care. Literally everybody. There are guys in Major League Baseball, and there's no shame in it, that come in when it's a blowout and they eat innings. They're the inning eaters. And I have no problem with that. They have roles on teams. You're not going to win every game. You're not going to be competitive every single night. Some nights you get your teeth kicked in, and you need somebody to go in there and save the bullpen in the starting rotation. That's Ian Gibaut. Ian Gibaut's a guy that is supposed to eat innings in a blowout, win or loss.
Yeah.
That's his thing. If any save he gets should be the 3-inning BS save that somehow Major League Baseball still keeps. There are positives from the game, and we're going to get into that, but I wanted to start with the Ian Gibaut thing because I don't get it. I don't get it.
I just don't know how that could be the choice.
We have a troll in the chat. Which option was better? I'm not kidding anybody. Luke Maley, the catcher from last year, is a better option than Ian Gibaut.
I think the biggest issue is the way they used him. In what world are the 3 pitchers that pitched before Ian Gibaut not built for higher leverage situations?
Yeah.
I don't see a world where Emilio Pagan, who's the highest paid reliever in that bullpen, as long as Nick Martinez is considered a starter, and then Tony Santillan, who many of us, including Nick Kirby and Trace on the stream yesterday, penciled in as who we thought was going to be that closer role, and you just don't use them. Obviously, we used them earlier in the game, and they lived up to expectations. And then you saved Gibaut for the 9th inning, and what I think we all characterize as one of the most important single games of the season without knowing how everything unfolds so far. You have to give everything you have to win that game. You have to empty the tank in front of 3,000 fans or whatever it was. I know this game doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Everyone's saying it's 162. Why are we freaking out over this one? We're freaking out over this one because we were told all offseason that there were going to be major changes to how this team plays and what we were wanting to watch this season. And we're one game in and we're watching the same Reds. We're watching base running mistakes. We're watching questionable pitching moves. We're watching starters get pulled before we think they should. We're watching the same things and sitting here scratching our heads on opening day as it felt like we've watched for the last 2 or 3 years. And I think that's where most of this frustration comes from, is if the Reds would have lost yesterday to the Giants, I don't think anyone's pulling their hair out. It's the way they lost. It's the fact that we're one game into the Terry Francona era and we're asking questions about his managerial decisions. This is as close to a nightmare scenario for opening day as you could possibly get in terms of the way we lost. Obviously, you can get down the line to, a blowout and guys don't play well. Obviously, there's silver linings to this performance that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Some of the guys that we expect to carry this team played great yesterday. And I think that's part of why it hurts so bad too, is because there's so many highlights in that game that you'd be able to hold on to maybe all year long.
Yeah.
I mean, winning that game with the start Hunter Greene gave you would be a highlight of the season. Not just because it's opening day, but because that's an unbelievable performance. And now we basically lose all of those just because you lost the game. It's very frustrating to watch. And, you win the next 2 games, you win the series, everyone will be back in. That's how baseball works. The sky is falling every single time you lose, and then, the sun is as bright as it's ever been, and the birds are chirping every game you win. So that's the beauty of a 162-game season, and it's frustrating. And I don't think I'll freak out more about a single game than I will about opening day all year long, probably.
Yeah.
But it's the worst way possible we could have lost that game.
Casey, I have some audio from it, and this was Ian Gibaut. I wanted to start with Ian Gibaut after the game. I don't mean to pick on the guy. I do the bit that, he's the great godson of England. And I think that everybody who goes through a situation like that in professional sports, they're going to feel terrible. And I don't mean to be mean, but it's opening day, and I expect a game that's absolutely dominated by the Cincinnati Reds, like Jacob said.
Yeah.
Dominated. The Reds dominated 99% of that game. And to lose it like that, it's just unacceptable. It's days like this where I am a little bit thankful there's no game.
Yeah.
It's kind of a mixed bag. I want there to be a game to avenge last night's loss. But taking a breath, because I couldn't do another back-to-back heartbreaking loss again tonight. I couldn't do it.
No, not one bit.
Ian Gibaut, after the game last night, was interviewed, and here's the video.
Sure, I mean, it's kind of how you always think, and then innings not over till the 3rd one, so the first 2 don't matter unless you get the 3rd, so.
I think when they took the lead, you were at like 13 strikes, 10 balls. Was the command just not where it usually is with you today?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. Felt like I was going after him pretty good. Yeah, I mean, felt good out there, honestly.
You've taken the ball in a lot of different situations since you've been here. How much do you like the opportunity to be able to try to close and obviously next time have a different outcome, certainly? But
sure.
what do you like about that situation, though, just to be that guy?
I mean, that's why you play the game. You want to be the guy that gets the last guy out. It's kind of what I've done all my life. It's kind of what I've been used to, so obviously we'll look for a different outcome next time, but stuff happens.
It certainly does.
It does. That's why they call it the beautiful game.
Stuff happens. Again, no disrespect to Ian Gibaut, but there has to be a better. And what's the better option? How about anybody? How about anybody? I was looking at the spring training numbers again, just because I was maybe curious. Do you know Ian Gibaut played in more games than any pitcher for the Reds this spring? Any pitcher. He had 11 games played. He obviously didn't have the most innings because he doesn't start, but 11 games played was the most by any pitcher this spring. They were trying to get this guy on the roster. They were trying. They like him. Whatever it is, they like him. They like him to be a Red. They like him to be a part of the organization. Clearly, Terry Francona likes him, as a guy that's a Hall of Fame manager.
Yeah.
His decision to put him as the closer for the Reds on opening day, the biggest possible spot, they like Ian Gibaut. My question is, why? And I don't mean to be too disrespectful. I really don't try to be too disrespectful. But when you look at the pantheon of great pitchers, Ian Gibaut's not on that list. And there's a lot of guys that have played for the Reds over the last 20 years that aren't on that list. There's a lot of guys out there forever that aren't on that list, on any team. But in that moment, our manager, and by the way, I'm a guy who doesn't like criticizing the manager. You guys know this. I stood by David Bell last year when they didn't have a single healthy player. And David Bell was still out there managing the best he could. But Terry Francona making that decision after a dominating game, I don't get it. Maybe he can explain it to me better in this presser.
Going through the middle of the order, and there was just a lot of deep counts.
You said that it was going to be mix and match situationally with Diaz out. How did you land on Gibaut for the night?
Well, I kind of said how we got there. We used Pagan early. That was probably our other thought. We would have probably flip-flopped those two, but the long at bat against Hunter probably cost him the 6th inning. So, and again, I thought our bullpen at that point really, really did a great job.
And he's right. They did do a great job. And by the way, shout out to Fox 19 Jeremy Rauch for that first video. I get the decision to go to the relievers he went to prior to Ian Gibaut. Those were all fine. And our guy in the chat, Yash, is saying, well, if he would have done his job, nobody's saying anything, right? He came out there and didn't do his job. The issue was,
It's not supposed to be his job.
It's not his job. Everybody else has a role. I don't know what Ian Gibaut's role is. It's clearly not going to be the closer going forward. If Stuart Fairchild doesn't make
Is it going to be a Red going forward?
If it does, I don't know.
the last guy on the roster. You close him opening day. Maybe it's just to make your mind up. You throw him into the fire, so you either close this game or you're gone.
Yeah.
I don't know how, if you are legitimately the last pitcher on the roster, and that's your first outing of the year, how are you on the roster?
I don't know. I can't possibly fathom what happened yesterday. Going forward, I'm sure Terry Francona knows that that's not going to be the situation. There was discussions as Tony Santillan being the closer, and if you watched that 8th inning yesterday, he looked like the best closer I've ever seen. He was disgusting. He was awesome. So were the other 2 guys, the other 3 guys. So that's all I have to say about that. We're going to try to transition over to the positive stuff.
I will say one more thing about that Terry Francona clip that I think does jump out. There's been a lot of tongue-in-cheek, David Bell would have won that game and, all that different stuff about the manager after the offseason we had. I think, a lot of that conversation, might be warranted. We were sold a bill of goods that one hire changes everything, and one game into a 162-game season, it doesn't seem like much has changed. I think a lot will, though, and the thing that really jumps off the page to me there is what we saw in that clip from Terry Francona. When has David Bell blown a billion games in his career as a Reds manager? Absolutely. Has he ever given an answer like that in a post-game press conference? Hey, I would have flipped those 2 guys.
No.
I would have flipped those 2 guys if I could do it over again. It's such a candid answer. It's a real manager. It's a real answer. He's telling you what he's thinking. He's telling you what's going on in his mind. That just tells me even if the Reds' win total doesn't take some kind of massive jump, it's going to be a much better season as a fan, as an organization, to have real people with, beating hearts and working brains at the microphone and talking about the team and managing the team. I think, even though we're not all, sunshine and rainbows with Terry Francona anymore, the honeymoon seems to be over, there's a big change in that post-game press conference from what we've seen from David Bell.
Nobody's saying fire to RM in the chat. Are we saying fire Terry? No, nobody's saying fire Terry Francona. It's game one. Everybody's eyes were on that game. That's why there's the overreaction. But it is something to watch going forward because it was just a mind-boggling decision. It's crazy to me. He made it. He's going to stand by it, and we're going to move on. That's it. Mr. Most said in the chat, maybe it was a prove it moment. Crazy spot for it to be
do it there.
Crazy spot for it to be a prove it moment, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's like we want to see if you have it in you to do this.
Yeah.
He doesn't. Ian Gibaut has a spot on the Reds as the guy, like I said, the innings eater. He's going to come in and he's going to provide some semblance of consistency when the game's out of reach. There is a role for that. There is a job for that. I'm not saying he shouldn't be in Major League Baseball. I'm saying he shouldn't be the closer of the Cincinnati Reds. Yesterday on the show, everybody was down about the bullpen, and I don't think the bullpen was that bad. Ian Gibaut is the one name really on that bullpen that you look at, and it's like, all right, maybe I don't really think that guy is going to be a key contributor. The rest of the names, I really do have belief and faith in. It's just yesterday, Terry Francona went to the wrong guy. He went to the wrong guy. I don't know how nobody in the organization didn't help him with that decision, but clearly not the right one. In terms of, we talk about all those weird algorithm things last year, losing by 1 run. I don't know what it's called. They all make the joke on it on Twitter. But I sent this to Jacob yesterday. And apparently, based on metrics that I don't understand.
This is the kind of stuff you really like, though.
Yeah, it is. So the Giants yesterday, they were called the Luck Merchants per this Twitter site. Final score 6-4. The deserved to win. The Reds had a 72% deserved to win percentage.
Wow.
The Giants had a 20%. Again, you can take a look at those.
Does that translate to actually winning?
No. You can take a look at those charts and graphs. But it was unlucky because the Reds did dominate. I mean, there's no way around it. The Reds played better than the Giants. I saw Bryce Spalding yesterday tweet out, if you play that game 10 times exactly the way it's played, the Cincinnati Reds win 9 of those 10. Yesterday was the one. That's the kind of thing where I'm almost a little bit tired of it because last year you had all those 1-run losses and they kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And it's like, are we just unlucky or are we bad? And the line gets blurred once you lose all of them. Yeah. When you lose all your 1-run games, the lines, it's like you're bad. Yesterday, that was a good team, man. It was just a really, really good baseball team. Every single player outside of Ian Gibaut did their job. It was about as near as a flawless performance as you could possibly play on your first day of the year. It was near flawless. Do we need more from the offense? Yeah, we do. But it was a hell of a pitcher in Logan Webb that we were roughing up, I would say, for the early part of that game.
Lucky for us, we did end up losing by 2 runs, so still 0-0 in 1-run games, able to improve on that from last year. We know how important that is.
The Reds should, that should count for a 1-run loss. Nick Kirby says, I like Tito. His intangibles have real value, but I don't care at all what a manager says in a press conference. I care what they actually do that increases or decreases the chances of winning.
Yeah,
that's
fair. But the gripe against David Bell, I feel like at least the loudest complaint against David Bell for most of Reds fan base was the press conferences, was the public appearance, and that's just such a stark contrast from what we saw from Terry Francona yesterday. That's all. I certainly don't care if Terry Francona is going to be a press conference manager. I don't need him here. I need him to win games. But I think, yesterday when everyone's holding on to the negatives, it is important to point out, one positive from Terry Francona. And it is, a very, very clear difference from what we've seen from David Bell in the press conferences over the last few years.
I do think, perception does matter, a little bit. I was never a fire David Bell guy. Again, I've made that very, very clear. People disagreed with me. That's fine. I was never a fire David Bell guy because I didn't think that he was costing the Reds games. I thought the players in the field were the ones costing games. Yesterday, Terry Francona did step up. He took accountability. That was on him. I get it. He made a mistake. But it was on him. If you had to give a blame percentage, Terry Francona gets 90%. Ian Gibaut gets the other 10 and nobody else gets touched, in my eyes. And maybe that's a little bit too much to blame to put on Terry Francona, but that was his call. Everybody in the world knew Ian Gibaut wasn't the answer, and he still rocked with him. If you want to give me the split thing, that's fine, but it didn't make sense because Tony Santillan had 2 lefties that he faced. So the split thing's inconsistent. We can't.
And if you're going to use that, you have to use it.
You have to use it. You got to be all in with that. So this show is not going to be a fire Terry Francona. That's not what we're doing here.
We're at least a month away.
It's game 1. We were excited yesterday. We were at an all-time high through 8 innings of that game.
Yeah.
I had $100 on it. And we sit here today disappointed. That's what we're talking about. We're going to talk the positives next. I'm going to take a break. We're going to regroup, and we're only going to be positive for the next segment. For all the guys that want to talk about the positives, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. I understand, because the Reds played a hell of a baseball game yesterday outside of that 9th inning.